doing tonight, Boost Retreat? Boost, yes. Thank you for that. Now I know that every time someone hasn't liked my speech, they're just saying boost. Now I know. I appreciate that. We'll just get that out of the way earlier. It usually comes later. Guys, I'm really excited to be here. My name's Riley Stirman. It's okay if you haven't heard of me because I haven't done anything important. But I've heard of you, so I'm excited to be here. Marty Baker told me about what was happening here, and it just made me really, really excited, and I am so glad to be here with all of you. I do want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I feel like you shouldn't talk to strangers or listen to strangers, so I want to be friends with y'all, and we're going to do that real quick. I go to Abilene Christian University, about an hour south of here. Hey, thank you. I know we're Lubbock Christian people, but I'm glad we're friends here. So you're going to hear from Jerry Taylor later. He's a professor from there. He's a great speaker. Glad I'm not following him. Thanks for that. So I am working on a master's degree in ministry, which means I never sleep. And I did my undergraduate degree in biblical languages. That means I took 3 years of Greek, 1 year of Hebrew, and that's why I have this nice pale tan here. You don't go outside when you study those things. Also, I like playing ultimate frisbee, if any of you have ever tossed a frisbee. Thank you. And to complete this friendship process, I need you to tell me your name on 3. 1, 2, 3. Nice to meet you, Boost. Glad you're here. That's pretty awesome. So something else you should know about me, probably like most of you, I spent a lot of my time growing up in the church. That was always what I called home. Ever since I was little. I grew up in the church. I never really got plugged in with my school, so the summers were really what I enjoyed. I got to do all these fun things with my church. We got to go to camps and retreats. We got to go, on just random trips for ice cream with the interns, all that fun stuff. And so I always had a blast. And far and away, my favorite thing that I ever did with my youth group was something called Trek. Anybody in here done Trek? Okay. One person, excellent. Okay, so Trek is this really fun thing where you go and you spend some time alone in the mountains. A mountain is like a really big hill. I know we're from Texas. We haven't seen a lot of those. So you go, you're in this spiritual kind of retreat from the world. You spend some time in the mountains. It's this incredible week where you get to go and backpack. You get to go spend time in tents. You get to use the bathroom outdoors, which kind of is what has to happen here. I hear y'all are having some trouble with the toilets. That's okay, so I feel right at home. Thank you for welcoming me. So on this trip, it was always my favorite thing. I loved it so much. But we went with a company called Wilderness Expeditions. And something this company did that I was not a huge fan of, at the very beginning of the week, they would take you on a trip that they called rappelling. Do y'all know what rappelling is? It's not to be confused with repelling, which is what I did to women in high school. It's something different. Y'all related too much and laughed too hard. Okay, so rappelling. Rappelling, I'm pretty sure, is from this old Greek word meaning stupidity. They strap you in like this cloth diaper that it just hugs you in all the wrong places, and then you tie this string around your waist coming out of your belly button, and then you just start walking backwards down a cliff, and I guess the goal is to get from the top to the bottom without wetting yourself. I don't know. I was never very good at it, but I'm terrified of heights. I hated this from the very moment I figured out that we had to do this. I couldn't stand it. We get to this giant cliff. They drive us to the bottom because they're nice. And then we look up at this giant cliff. It's about 60 feet, something like that. And we have to climb off of this thing. Easy, right? So the guides there, they know what they're doing. They take good care of us. They know that some people are scared. They ask us at the beginning when we're about to get going, is anybody here scared? And I raised my hand, and I was the only one raising my hand, including my youth minister's 10-year-old daughter, who was fine. I'm pretty sure I saw a chipmunk laughing at me after that. Just not good for self-esteem there. But like they know that people are scared. This isn't something you do a lot, especially if you come from Texas. So they were trying to tell us about all the safety measures that they had in place. They were trying to tell us, okay, you guys are fine. We've done this so many times. We are so ridiculously safe. They tell everyone that Real professional climbers make fun of them because of how safe they are. They have all these backup systems. And so he was pointing out, he was like, okay, Riley, you say you're scared, right? Yes. Okay, so here's what I want you to think about. Okay, you're scared of falling, obviously, and hitting the ground and dying. And I say, thank you for that. I am. Yes. And he says, okay, for that to happen, I want you to have to visualize this, okay? You're going to be roped into this harness. On the other end of that rope, for you to slip and fall and hit the ground, here's what has to happen. You have to uproot that tree and 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 that tree. And he shows me that I'm roped into 7 different trees. And I'm over here thinking, well, I had a big lunch. It's still a possibility. I'm still a little nervous. And he says, Riley, even if somehow you manage to uproot 7 trees, you still have to get past these thighs. And he was very proud of those things. So obviously I'm feeling great. But something you need to know about rappelling if you've never been. It does not matter what they tell you. It does not matter the facts in your head. It does not matter that you are tethered into 7 trees. When you start backing off of a cliff, all that goes out the window. It does not matter how safe you know you are. The only question in your head is, what if? What if I'm not that safe? Tonight, I want to talk to you about faith, because this is one of the best images of faith that I think I can come up with. Not that I think God asks us to back off cliffs very often. If we do, I would change religions today. But because I think there's something to be learned about faith from this image. And because, like most of you, I grew up hearing about faith. I grew up hearing this word and never really understanding it. And I truthfully don't know if I understand it now. You see, I think that we as Christians are very good at giving direction without giving directions. And what I mean by that is, and I hope you will relate to some of this, I feel like whenever we ask for advice as Christians, we always get these things that are something like, let go, let God. You need to have more faith. You need to trust more. You need to let it all go, give it over to Him. And I'm one of those people that I want to know, how in the world do you do that? Give me some steps here. Give me instructions. Give me directions. Does that make sense? They give us direction without giving us directions. And that kind of bothers me, especially when faith is tricky, especially when I feel like I'm backing off a cliff. I want instructions. Now, I told you that I wanted to talk about faith, and I think one of the best ways to talk about faith is to go to the book of John. John is one of my all-time favorite books of the Bible. I love it so much. It's one of our 4 Gospels, and I think I love it most because it's a little weird. It's a little out there. It's different than our other 3 Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, pretty similar for the most part, but John, odd man out. For one thing, John doesn't include a single parable. We get something like 24 parables in the other 3 Gospels, and John doesn't include a single one. Jesus does a lot of talking, but not in parables. I think that's interesting. John also messes with the timeline of Jesus' ministry when he's telling that story a little bit. So do y'all know the story where Jesus goes into the temple and he drives them out with a whip and tells them to get out of here, that story, yeah? Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they put that story at the very end, right when Jesus is about to be killed. But John puts that almost at the very, very beginning, which I think is interesting. I don't know if John has a bad memory or if he just thought it would serve a better purpose there. I'm not sure. But I find that to be a little odd. And for another thing, John opens with this really kind of strange poem that you don't really get anywhere else in the Bible. And in this poem, John pulls a not-so-great author move where he's telling you all about the entire book basically in 30 seconds. If you're thinking about writing a book, don't follow John because he tells you the ending immediately, and it's ruined. He basically says, this is a book all about Jesus. You've heard of him. Jesus is the Son of God. And Jesus, more than that, is God. And Jesus is God that came to this earth and walked around. And because of him, we can have a special relationship with God. So right off the bat, John tells you what this story is about. And I think that's fascinating. I think we have a lot we can learn from that. But the last thing I want to tell you about the book of John that I think is interesting is a nerdy little Greek fact that only people like me find interesting, probably. So something you need to know, Greek has a word for faith just like English does, but they also have a verb form of the same word, which we don't really have in English. We say you have faith, we don't say you faith in something. That's basically what it is in Greek. And so when it's used that way in Greek, usually we have to translate it with trust or believe or something like that. It's close, but it's not quite the same. Faith means something a little different to us. So the word faith in John occurs over 100 times. And every single time it's used in John, it's a verb. And I think that's kind of interesting. I think a few times would be, maybe an accident, maybe a coincidence. But I think John's trying to tell us something about faith if he's using it as a verb every single time. And one of the best stories to go to look for exactly what he's trying to tell you is the story where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. So in John chapter 11, Mary and Martha, who are good friends with Jesus, send word to Jesus. He's off doing his own thing. And they say, Jesus, your friend Lazarus, who you love, is sick. We need your help. And they know that Jesus can come heal him. They're very familiar with who he is and what he can do. The problem is that Jesus stays put. He doesn't move. He stays where he is for a couple more days. And then when he comes back, he finds out that Lazarus has died. And that's where we get that really fun memory verse that we can impress our friends with, Jesus wept. Cool. So he goes there and he sees Martha. And Martha is obviously not in the best place. Lazarus is her brother, and she's grieving. She's just lost her brother. And she goes up to Jesus. She's probably very upset. And she says, Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would still be standing here today. I.e., where have you been? What took you so long? It's a bold move, Martha. But she asks this question, where have you been? And then she transitions. She says, but I know that God will give you whatever you ask. And then Jesus says, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. All those who come to me will live and will never die. Some interesting words at a funeral, I think. And then Jesus asks the very question that the rest of the book hinges on. Martha, do you faith this? That's one of our times where he uses the word faith as a verb. Martha, do you faith this? And Martha says, yes, I believe that you are the Messiah, God's anointed one, the Son of God who is to come in this world. Wow. Martha is going through maybe one of the darkest times in her life. Martha is backing off of that cliff. I don't know if you've ever lost someone close to you, but that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like the ground has come out from under you. And she expresses this statement of faith in Jesus. And Jesus does exactly what he says he's going to do. He brings life. Now that question, do you believe this, is one that carries us through the entire book of John in a very interesting way. You see, when John tells a story, he usually introduces Jesus and another character, but there's also a background character that the story is actually about. This isn't really a story about Lazarus. How do you know that? Well, he spends most of it dead, so he doesn't have a lot of lines. This is a story about Martha. This is a story about faith. So what do we learn from this? Well, I learned that I think we have the wrong idea about faith. Because usually I think when we talk about faith, go with me, will you? When we talk about faith, we're usually saying I can mentally acknowledge something, okay? If I have faith in God, I am sitting there quietly in my head and mentally acknowledging, yes, I trust God, right? Okay, so that's kind of the sense of faith as a noun. But the question then becomes, how do we move our faith from a noun to a verb? Because in John, there's very little element of faith that's happening inside the head. Not much of it is cognitive or quiet. If you ask Martha, she does make this statement of trust and confession of I believe, but she does it very publicly and openly. She's involving other people in this. She's surrounded by people. This is a funeral. People are mourning, and she makes this public declaration. And then John, because he's using all of his verbs, he tells us that those people who go on faithing in Jesus live a different life because of that faith. It has almost nothing to do with what's happening up here. It's all about what's in their actions and how they live their life. And what's more than that, the very end of the book of John tells us that it was written specifically so people like you and me who didn't get to see Jesus might have faith in him, and because of that might have life. That's what the entire purpose of the book is. And so the question becomes, how do we move our faith from a noun to a verb? Well, I don't know. I have a few answers, but I think I would answer that question with another question. Everybody here heard of Bill Gates? Yeah. What's he famous for? Microsoft, yeah. Wearing glasses, looking really nerdy. He's the richest man in the world. Currently, I think he actually just passed Jeff Bezos like yesterday. Not important. He's very, very wealthy, and he founded Microsoft, one of the most prolific computer companies in the world. I want to ask you, do you think that Bill Gates' kids ever freak out if they have computer trouble? Do you think that LeBron James's kids freak out when they can't reach the top shelf? I'm going to go with probably not. I tend to think that they are fine because they know that they're taken care of, that they're in good hands, that their parents specialize in this and can take care of them. And so my question is, why should we be any different? If we believe all these songs that we just sang up here, if we believe in a God that created the universe in 6 days, may I add, if we believe in a God that came down here to earth, who died for our sins, and who rose him from the dead, why can't we believe that that God is working in us and through us? Christians should be the most annoyingly confident people of all time because we believe in a God that is taking care of us, because we believe that our God can and does do anything he pleases. We should go through life with absolute certainty that we are taken care of, and because of that certainty, we should act as if we know that we will not fail and we will not be defeated. That's what faith in action looks like. It has almost nothing to do with what's happening up here. It has everything to do with how you are living. Because people can see by your actions what you believe in. When you get stressed by school, by lack of money, by whatever's going on in life, people notice. People notice, especially those people who do not believe in God and are having the exact same stress. They're looking at you and they're saying, I'm probably not that much different from them. Because when things get difficult, when you are backing off the cliff, when you see the ground going away from you, it is so hard to remember what you have been told that you are safe. The only thing you're doing is looking at the ground far behind you. It's exactly what happened to Peter when he walked on the water. He saw the wind, he saw the waves, and he got scared. And so your question is probably, now what? And that's a good question. Well, something else you need to know about me, the older I get, the less I believe in coincidences. I believe that each of you is exactly where you need to be right now. I believe that the Holy Spirit has all of us exactly where we need to be at any given moment. And even if somehow we think we could get off track and mess that up, the Holy Spirit will find a way to work in exactly whatever place that we are in. And so right now, right this moment, you are exactly where you need to be. And that carries some weight with it. That's a little scary. Because if you really think about it, any day where you wake up could be the day that you look back on as the day your life changed. Because that's the funny thing about the rest of your life. It can start whenever you want it to. You're here for a reason. And I want you to start thinking about what that reason might be. Think about today. Think about this weekend. What were you meant to hear? What were you meant to learn? And more importantly than that, what are you meant to do? Because hearing and learning are all fine, but they're just not the point. I'm very sorry, no disrespect, but if you leave here and every part of your life is exactly the same, something went wrong. The whole point of this here is to come together to worship, not so that we know more about God, not so that we hear more about God, but so that our lives look more like God. That's why we're here. We're not in it for information, we're here for transformation. We're not here to leave the church walls looking exactly the same as we did when we got here. We're supposed to leave looking a little more like Jesus. When Jesus called his disciples, he didn't say, "Follow me and you will hear the coolest thing." He didn't say, "Follow me and you will learn more than anyone else ever has." No, he said, "Follow me and I will turn you into fishers of men. I will put you to work. I will put you in charge of the most important work that this world has ever seen." And let me tell you, there's a lot of work to do. This is a room of world changers. And how do I know that? Well, for one thing, you're all my friends. Would I lie to you? For another thing, you're here. And you're supposed to be here. This is a room of world changers. And I don't know if you've noticed, but this world could use some changing. We've got a lot of work to do. So when you leave here, your goal is not to blend. It's not to be the same. It's not to go with the flow. It's to be changed. It's to be different. So I need you to be asking yourself, why does the Spirit have me right here? And how is my life going to change today? Because that's how we move faith from a noun to a verb. And so it could be something small. It could be talking to that kid at lunch. It could be giving someone $1 when they ask. It could be talking to someone who needs it. It could be sharing a smile or a kind word. To you, that's something. To someone else, that's everything. But it could also be something big. Let's think here for a moment. What is that huge thing that you've always wondered if you would be good at? What's that huge thing that you know is completely impractical, but you still kind of want to try anyway? What is that thing that's been in the back of your head that you just can't shake, that you think maybe God is trying to work? What's that thing that terrifies you and gets you out of your comfort zone? There's a good chance that's where God's calling you. I don't know if you know this, but life of Jesus isn't supposed to be a comfortable one. That was never something that he promised. If you're chasing something that makes you uncomfortable, chances are God's going to do something pretty good with it. So let's think here. What are the big things you could do? I mean, you could preach a sermon at your church. I know what you're thinking. I would think the same thing. Riley, I'm young. Yes, I know. We've met. We're friends, remember? Yes, you're young, but also people need messages of faith from people like you, from people who are out in the world, from people who know what this culture is looking like. You guys are influencing an upcoming generation in America. You guys have that power. And you guys have voices that can be used and heard. You can go home and you can go spread Jesus to your friends at school who you've never had a religious conversation with, but maybe who have never heard about Jesus in the first place. And you could inform them and then transform them. You could lead them to the kind of changed life that you are showing them. You could show them your faith in action, that you are confident in all things, because you're backed by a God who can do all things. You could go across the world. You could touch lives on a mission trip. You could move across the world. There are millions and millions and millions of people who have never heard the name Jesus Christ. And they're still made by the same God we are. They're still just as loved as all of us are. What is that thing? Dream big. Because if our faith stays a noun, it's not going to do us any good. Our faith is meant to be an action. Because God is all about action. He works. I don't know if you know this, but God wrote a story very similar to John. He told us how it was going to end. It's called Revelation. It's kind of trippy. But he tells us exactly what's going to happen. At the end of times, he will dry every tear. There will be no more pain, no more sorrow. He will bring a new heaven and a new earth. And all people everywhere will be united in perfect love, in perfect community, worshiping the name of God. And at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. That's the future we're working for. And we do not have an option. That's what's going to happen because God gets his way. But that is the end of the story that you are currently living. And we need to stay motivated to push people towards the end of that story that God has for us. That's the end. I don't know where you are with your faith. I don't know if you're comfortable at the top of the cliff. I don't know if you're at the bottom of the cliff scared looking up. Maybe you're strapped in the harness and you're just about to back off. But wherever you are, just know this. God's got you. And some pretty amazing things can happen when God's got you. Let's go be people of action.